Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Tanya and You, Chapter 21. So, 21 is a kind of a direct continuation to Chapter 20, and it continues to develop this idea through the next few chapters. So, we're talking about this love, this hidden love that we have. And then Tanya does something so amazing today. Talks about to develop this idea of how we can live by this hidden love. That this hidden love shouldn't be something that only gets revealed during a crisis, my identity crisis, my Jewish identity crisis. Suddenly I feel connected to God, right? We spoke about this love, that we define this love, that it means it expresses itself through wanting to connect with Hashem, connect with God, right? It's just like you love someone, you want to be close to them, you want to be with them, you want to make them happy, you want to live up to their expectations. So too, our love to Hashem, our love to God, expresses itself in wanting to be close to God, wanting to listen to His instructions, to live a life true to God. And sometimes we may not be living up to that on the daily basis. We make many decisions every day. And some of them we don't always take into account what does God want. And then we think about, what do I want? What makes me feel good? And that's just the story of our life. But sometimes when it comes to that crisis of big decisions, do you believe in God or don't believe in God? You're making such a big decision that's going to really express who you are. Are you willing to, I mean, obviously, in an extreme case, are you willing to die for your religion? Oh, then I'm ready. Then I'm Jewish. I'm, that ahava misuteres, that hidden love, that hidden connection with God comes to the forefront and is revealed. So the Tanya is trying to argue and teach us how we can live on a daily basis with all the smaller decisions with that same ambition, that same connection, a feeling of connection to God in every decision that we make. So we started developing this idea in chapter 20, where we spoke about that ultimately the world is completely insignificant in God's perspective, in God's eyes. And we gave this analogy. And the analogy was the development of our words, because God created the world with words, 10 utterances, not many words. It wasn't a bookload of words, right? You look in the Torah, how many words? 100 words. The entire creation, 100 words. What is the significance of one word? How much weight does it carry? So last week we spoke about the significance of a word to its source, how it gets developed. We said there are 4 stages in the development of words. First, we have like the mental awareness, the world of intellect, right? For example, if someone is ashamed about something, well, before you could actually have the emotion of shame, first you have to have the awareness that this is something that is shameful, right? Before I have an emotion to love something, I love pizza, I first have the mental awareness that this is good or it's tasty, right? So first it begins in our mind. There's the intellectual awareness. And then it develops into a emotion in the heart. But the emotion in the heart is still raw and pure. It's not developed. It's not no construct to it. There's no language, right? We don't feel in English. We don't feel. It's just a raw emotion. There's no words per se. And from there, it goes into our mind. We start thinking about it. There's some language already, right? We all think in a certain language. So we think about the emotion. So now it's really more concise and more concrete. And then from there, we actually speak about it. We use physical words. So one word, what is the significance of one word compared to the words or the ability to speak, right? The ability to speak. I could speak unlimited amount of words. What is the significance of one word compared to the thoughts in my mind? One word, billions of thoughts. My mind is running constantly. What is the significance of one word to the raw emotion in my heart, which is the source of the thoughts in my mind? What is the significance of one word to the mental, the intellectual awareness, which is not even an emotion? I mean, it's totally insignificant. Totally insignificant. So too, the world, which was created with God's words, is totally insignificant in God's world. It's minuscule. It's almost not exist. It's like taking a little cup of water and pouring it into the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, what's that little drop of water worth anything, right? There's billions and trillion, whatever amount of water, right? So one little word, God spoke 100 words, created the world. What's the significance of that? So that was last week's chapter, talking about that there is a world. God created the world, but compared to the greatness of God, it's almost nothing. And therefore, we have this idea that before the world, after the world was created, God didn't really make any change in God. Okay. Chapter 21 takes this a step further. Chapter 21, it gets a little more philosophical. We spoke last week already that there is a Hasidic philosophy in Tanya as well, and it's important to study it, not to get too carried away with it, because the goal over here is not the Kabbalistic philosophy over here. It's really always the practical element of it. How does this wrap? How does this come back to me becoming a better person and closer to God? So we throw in the philosophy just to explain certain ideas, but it's really not here just to philosophize about God, which is important. It's really about how to live a better life. So there is some deep philosophy in chapter 21, but in the 20 minutes we have, we'll kind of give the gist of it. And the main thing is, what does it mean for me today, right? It's always like we say in Hebrew, the uvechein, and therefore what? After we can spend a half hour philosophizing about God, and therefore what? How am I going to be a different person today? Right? What resolutions, what changes in my life can I make because of this profound idea? So what's the idea of chapter 21? We take this idea of the nullification, the insignificance of this world in God's perspective to a whole new level. To a whole new level. And that is the Tanya tells us that when you say speech, you have to be careful. When you use a physical analogy for God, you can't take it literally. In other words, like this: every good teacher uses parables and analogies to give over messages to children, right? You start with a young age. Instead of teaching a child 1 + 1 is 2, you say 1 apple plus 2 apples equals 3 apples. 1 apple plus another apple equals 2 apples, right? You use apples to kind of give over the idea, even though the idea is not limited to apples, right? And that is with an apple, but more deeper, more profound ideas, you use analogies to kind of bring out the point. And that's good. But it's important to know that the analogy, the parable, we're only trying to use it for a specific point, not to get carried away with the other details of the analogy. And the same is true when we use human terms in reference to God. And we have this all over the Torah. We say, God saw. God has eyes. Does it mean he has 2 physical eyes? Does he have a good ophthalmologist? Right? what does it mean that God has eyes? So obviously it means something, right? Eyes could represent um, uh, eyes can represent the idea that God is always watching over us, and um, he's the providence of God, etc. Um, eyes, yeah, God has ears, God walked, God talked, right? All these things, it's using a certain analogy. So there's something about it that we're trying to portray about God, but it's not accurate, obviously, in many instances. So talking about speech, for example, our speech and God's speech have certain important components that are very similar, but they're also very different in many ways. How are they different? When we speak, our words, although we can't touch them or feel them, but our words become a being for itself. They are in existence on its own. And when we speak, we are kind of revealing and uh, you know there's something that is leaving us and going into the world, the atmosphere, right? During COVID, by the way, there was this big talk, right? Social distancing, right? Because when we speak, there's something actually physical that's leaving us, going into the atmosphere. There's, when you speak for a long time, you get tired, right? You can learn the art of speech, right? People who speak a lot, people who are on the radio, people who are on television, people who give classes, professors. You can learn the art of how to speak that doesn't tire you out. My brother, who tells me recently that whenever he gives a class, he gives an hour class, he's not yelling, he's not shouting, he's not running around, he's just giving a class. He said he gets very, very tired. He gets very, very tired. So he spoke to a speech therapist, and they told him, "You're not speaking properly. If you would speak properly, the breathing, then it will be a lot easier for you to speak for a long time." So, in other words, when we're speaking words, we are creating something, and this something is leaving us and going out to the atmosphere. Other people are able to hear it, etc. The point is that it's not us; it's something separate from us, which is called speech. But in reference to God, could God speak and something should go outside of his existence? Could he create something new through speech and now it's not God? Obviously, the world is filled with God's presence. So when we say speech, there's only a specific component of speech in reference to God that we are trying to use with this analogy of God spoke. And that is the concept. The concept of speech is the act of revelation. No one knows what's going through my mind until I speak my mind. Oh, you don't want me to speak my mind. I want to know what is in your mind, so speak. Child comes home from preschool yesterday. One of my kids graduated from preschool, right? A big simcha, all excited. How was school today? Not saying. What did you do today? Nothing. What, right? They don't like to speak. Whatever happened, whatever they're thinking is in their mind. The only way for me to know what's going on in their mind if they use words to reveal what is hidden, right? Just the other day, we were having this discussion. Are mind readers real? Or are they just, maybe they use some psychology and some sleight of hands, some magic. But they're not really reading someone's mind, right? We're not able to truly read a mind unless they are speaking their mind, right? They are revealing what they're thinking. I don't want people to know all my thoughts, right? So I choose which thoughts to reveal. So the idea, the concept of speech is not the physical components of speech that we're talking about. We're talking about the idea, the conceptual speech, the idea of revelation. Revealing something, communicating to others means to reveal something that is hidden. So when we speak about God's speech, God spoke, God said, God created the world through speech. What we are referring to is the concept of speech. God revealed himself. There was an act of godly revelation through speech, and through that he created the world. So that is what we mean by speech. But God's speech is not like our speech, that there's a new existence, there's a new idea, there's a new being called this word. And this word left my existence and it went out to the atmosphere. That's not possible with God. In fact, God's speech always remains within him. In other words, like this. We said in last chapter that there is speech in the mouth that we utter. There is words, there's language of the mind, our thoughts. There's also language. We think in English, right? We think in language. Imagine though the connection between those thoughts, the thoughts of our mind and our being, is a lot stronger. It's a lot more intimate. It's my thoughts. How about the words, the letters, the language before it enters the mind, while it's still in this emotion, the world of emotion, which is a lot more refined. We can't really identify the words. It's more of a raw, pure emotion. How about the words while they are still in our intellectual awareness, which are a lot more refined and hard to identify? It's nothing. It's almost non-existence. That is the words of God. The words of God are so much one with God himself. It's like the words of a human being while it is still in our intellectual awareness, where you can't really pinpoint it. You can't really identify it. It's one with the person. So when we say, and this is the big idea of chapter 21, when we say that God created the world through speech, what we're saying is that God didn't really create anything outside of him. The entire creation is through speech. It's a godly revelation within himself. So is the world a true independent existence? Absolutely not. It's like us speaking without actually speaking. It's the words that we want to speak, but they remain inside. With God, that is speech, because it's not possible for God to speak outside of himself. Now, this is a radical idea, because it's radical because we, in our consciousness, we don't recognize this. In our perspective, we exist. We exist independently. That's our natural feeling. And we're trying to be good Jews, so we bring God into our life. In other words, we have a life, and now we want to infuse our life with meaning, with purpose. So we bring God into our life, which, make no mistake, it's a very virtual, it's a good thing to do. But what it means is there's me, and then there's God in addition, right? And maybe I try to, integrate God in every area of life, but ultimately there's my perspective, and then God joins my perspective. God sees the world very differently. God says there is no me, there is no other. It's all me. It's all an act of my revelation. And what happens is God conceals himself, as we know the idea of concealment, and it's kind of watered down God, but ultimately it's all within God. God's speech never leaves his existence. So the world is really one big extension of God. They use like this, talk about analogies. If you were walking here, you used to be in the New Orleans, you would see a lot of movie sets. Today, you don't see them as much. You're walking down Hollywood and you see a movie set, right? So there's a lot of actors. And a good actor really puts himself into his or her character. Now, a passerby, someone that's watching this, sometimes you don't even notice, oh, is this really a movie or is this a real scene? There was a story actually on the news a number of years ago where there was a big thing in news. There was a plane crash. It was literally in like one of the, the cable, those news. There was a plane crash, and we see this and that, whatever. It happened to be, it was just a movie set going on. But the point is, it looks real. Something happening. Take it a step further. The actors themselves, sometimes the actors get so into their character, it becomes real to them. They really start living that character. But then there's the producer. The producer who's watching all of this and orchestrating all of this, he knows exactly what's going on. He knows the actors. He knows it's just one big act, right? So the actor who's feeling the character sometimes feels like this is a reality. But what the actor has to do is stop for a moment and say, no, I'm just reading a script. It's not real. It's all the producer just telling me what to do. So sometimes we're in this movie. We are actors. And we get so carried away where we feel that this is reality. But that's from our perspective. We're born into it. So it feels real. But we're only in this movie that God is creating. And from God's perspective, it's nothing real. In other words, like this. In chapter 20, what we said was that the world is a creation outside of God, but it's minuscule, but it's insignificant, but it's like one little word compared to a bajillion words. It's like one little ounce of water compared to the Atlantic Ocean, like one little small flame compared to the sunlight. It's not significant. Carries little weight. Chapter 21 says, no. It's not that it's insignificant. It's non-existence. According to God's perspective, it's almost like an illusion. It's an illusion. From God's perspective, it's all part of me. The light is me, and the darkness is God himself as well. Everything is part of God. They use the analogy of a turtle and its shell. So a turtle tries to hide. So what does it do? It hides within its shell. Is it really hiding? No, the shell is part of the turtle. It's not that there's the shell. What do you call it? The shell and the turtle's head. And there's two separate things, and the turtle's hiding under a rock, hiding under a tree, hiding under something else. No, it's hiding within itself. God conceals himself and hides. But where does he hide? What conceals God? He himself, his own shell. The shell, the concealment, is a part of God as well. Darkness is not opposite of light. Darkness and light are both God. He decided to reveal himself through light, reveal himself through darkness. Once, in our perspective, one covers over the other, but ultimately it's all God. So from our perspective, we don't see this. For us, it seems that God is concealed, and it seems that we are in existence. But ultimately, it's really all God's true existence. So this is a radical idea, a little more philosophical, if you're following along, to that chapter 21, talking about the nullification, the nothingness of this world from God's perspective. And the takeaway, because even though we'll continue in chapter 22, how we apply this to the idea of living up to this in a daily basis, but the idea of understanding that sometimes the way we see things, the way we see the world, it's like an optical illusion. It looks one way, but it's not the true reality. And this comes into play when you have to make certain decisions in life. Decisions like charity. I don't see how I could do it. It just doesn't make any sense. The numbers don't add up. God says I should give 10% to charity. I can't do it. Shabbat. To me, to do Shabbat, it just doesn't make sense. Or any other mitzvah. It just doesn't fit to my reality. I don't see how this could work. But then we tell you, but that is because you're looking it through the illusion of this world. Try to see things top down. Try to see behind the veil. Try to see things the way God sees things. And perhaps that will help us with these decisions. I think I repeated this once when I was in Toronto a number of years ago. We went to a optical illusion museum, which I never knew that this exists, but there's a whole museum, and I saw this wasn't only Toronto. I later saw this advertised in other cities as well. A whole museum just for optical illusion. Very, it's fascinating. It's entertaining. And one of the things over there is you go into this room, and what it looks like this big round like barrel or this big round tube or tunnel that you're in, and there's like a little bridge, a bridge that has railings that you hold on to, and the whole room basically turns. It's all lights. The lights, the whole room turns, and it turns in a way where when you're standing in the middle on this bridge and everything around you is all turning, it literally makes you dizzy. It feels like you are turning with it, so much so that you literally have to hold on the railings not to fall. In fact, one of my younger children fell. From what? It was all steady. Wasn't like one of these 4D things where everything's shaking and moving. No, the bridge, the floor was steady, did not move. But it just plays with your brain that it makes you dizzy and you literally lose your balance. So you have to hold on. So I was holding on, I was, kept my eyes open, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. It literally feels like I'm turning and tossing and turning over here. Like I'm in a clothing dryer. But then, for a moment, I closed my eyes. And the moment I closed my eyes, in a second, everything was calm and relaxed. Nothing's moving. I'm standing, it's stable, it's secure, right? I don't feel dizzy at all. In other words, the whole thing was only through your eyes. When you saw this illusion, it made you dizzy and it made you feel unbalanced. All you have to do is just close your eyes. Just close your eyes, and everything is real. You tap into reality, and that I think is a message in chapter 21. We have this world around us, but it's an illusion. What do I have to do? So much you could do. You can run this way, run that way. Sometimes it's just about closing your eyes for a moment, closing your eyes and thinking, recalibrating. There's a God. There's the perspective of God that this world is ultimately an extension of God. This world is supposed to live up to God's expectations. When God asks me to do something, it is possible, even though the world that's around me argues and shouts at me and tells me that this is not possible. Just kind of recalibrate for a minute. Close your eyes, and then you'll realize that the whole world around us is one big optical illusion. So that's chapter 21. Like I said, it's a little philosophical, but powerful, very, very powerful. If you read it inside to get the more nitty gritty and nuances of the chapter. But we'll leave you with that. Chapter 21, fascinating chapter. I hope to see you next week as we continue this to develop this idea of chapter 22. Thank you all for joining us.